Alliance. I'm Sophie and I'm with Portland Workforce Alliance. I'm joined today by three of my friends and colleagues who are going to be participating on this panel about what it means to be a young professional in the workplace. So thank you all so much for joining me for this discussion about this important topic. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So if you all could just say your name, pronouns, what you are doing currently for work, and what that means, that would be great. So Sierra, let's go ahead and start with you.
Okay, great introduction. My name is Sierra. My pronouns are she, her. I work for a school district as a coordinator in the before and after school childcare programs. In this role, I keep the childcare programs operating in our school buildings, and means that I collaborate and work with internal and external departments, families, teachers, and school staff. I am in school. I'm finishing a business degree in management and leadership. So yes, I'm studying and working.
My name is Molly. I use she, her pronouns, and currently I'm working as a rehab office assistant and aide at an outpatient physical therapy clinic. We also have occupational therapy and speech therapy. My job kind of encompasses two smaller support roles. And so as an office assistant, I would work at the front desk and kind of check in patients, schedule for them, and just kind of answer any sort of questions they might have. And as an aide, I kind of help maintain just kind of the workflow of the day with the therapists. We have about 200 patients in the clinic a day, so it's a pretty busy environment, and it takes a lots of little pieces to keep it running. So I kind of help with all the background stuff.
My name's Abigail. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently working as a medical assistant for a trauma surgeon. So my day-to-day is all over the place, either scheduling emergency surgeries, taking phone calls from new patients, from emergency room follow-ups, from current patients, handling clinic when we have clinic. I'm still learning the role and it's ever changing. So just learning and adapting as I go.
Great, thank you so much for introducing yourselves and telling us all a little bit more about the work that you do. So I think we can start off, if you all could each just kind of share your journey with us, how you got here. So yeah, I would love to hear just kind of how you got your first full-time job and what it was like kind of transitioning to that, and then how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so the first full-time job in terms of like the kind of career that I wanted to get into is the one that I'm currently in. And I got this job kind of after interning at the school district that I'm at currently. And then after that, I started working in a variety of like short-term projects. And so basically what that means is just I wasn't hired as a full-time employee, but kind of just doing small short-term things on the side. And it was really great because it gave me a lot of flexibility while I was working without having that full-time commitment of being at an organization or a company, in this case, a school district. And then when I decided that I wanted to stay and I liked some of the opportunities that I was able to get, then I applied in their internal job portal, and here I am.
I kind of came home from college mid-pandemic and was kind of not really sure what I was supposed to do with myself because it was May of 2020. So it was like we weren't really doing much, right? And so I was looking for jobs that I could do and came across a small physical therapy clinic. And I actually didn't know when I applied that they were a family friend of mine who owned the business. So I started working there as their medical receptionist, and then kind of got introduced to physical therapy and kind of healthcare in general, and made my way to my current job now.
Great. Abigail?
Yeah, so I graduated college with a bachelor's in exercise science. I did not want to go down the therapy route of like physical or occupational therapy. I looked into that and it just wasn't something I was passionate about. I really did want to help people in a certain capacity, but I wasn't sure what that was. So I just started applying to random jobs. I applied to like event planning jobs, marketing jobs, even though I never had experience in marketing. And then I came across an activities director job at a skilled nursing facility. Got my foot in the door within skilled nursing, moved from activities director to admissions coordinator to admissions director. And then my last role in skilled nursing was administrator in training. I decided that was not something that I wanted to do, even though I was following the steps of the ladder that I felt like were correct. It just wasn't, looking back, wasn't what I was passionate about. Then an opportunity for medical assistant for a trauma surgeon opened up, and I wanted to stay within healthcare, but wanted to look at a different field. And so that's where I got to where I am now.
Thanks so much for sharing your journeys with us. So I'm curious, what was it like transitioning to that first full-time job that you had? I know for me personally, that was a big transition for me in my life. It was something that brought some challenges, some that I was expecting, some that I wasn't expecting. So what was it like making that transition, whether you were in school previously or interning previously, and then going into that first full-time job? What was that like? And anyone can start us off.
I can start us off. For me in particular, I went from like really loving the classroom environment in school and like finding a lot of motivation from just like the people around me, my professors, and just kind of like being in that academic space. And then when I came to work at that first clinic, it was really isolating because I was one of like 3 employees at a time. So I sat at a desk and like I had patient interaction, but I didn't have a lot of coworkers, and like, my boss would come in and we would chat and go over things. But it was harder to like find motivation to like find things I wanted to do just from myself, and kind of having to come up with those things instead of kind of pulling from my environment. So figuring out ways that I could make the job more worthwhile for me, or like, kind of fit my interests instead of just making myself mold to the job, was something I had to kind of adapt to do. So that was like kind of, I think I was a small fish in a big pond, and then I became just like a small fish in a small pond. And so I just kind of had to roll with it and try to make it as worthwhile as possible.
So transitioning into this role, I think transitioning into something that I didn't think I was going to be doing at all. I was actually studying pre-medicine when I was first in college, and that was a very major turn because now I'm studying business. So to everyone out there listening, your plan doesn't always go as you think it's going to go in the very beginning, and it's totally okay for you to change direction. Don't feel the pressure to have to make the decision now, or even when we're at our age. But transitioning into this role was really nice, honestly, because I was doing things that really fit my personality and what I like to do. And so I think that felt really good to be able to find something that I felt like I could connect with. And that was something that I could do as a possible career or just a job. But transitioning into my role was very interesting because it was right before the pandemic. And so we moved strictly remote. So I was hired 4 weeks before the pandemic. So I really didn't get a good idea of what my role was. The role was actually new. It hadn't been created yet. So there was a lot of moving parts. And we just immediately had to transition into not only remote work, but just a reaction to being in the pandemic. So I think with that, it was just so much change, but you can find a lot of growth and opportunities with that. So yeah.
Going from high school, going from college, you're so used to a structure. You go to class from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., or you have lab from 7:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. You're so used to routine. And I think that was hard for me to transition, that I was kind of given this job and it's like, okay, you can make it however you want to, like you can make these activities, or you have these things to do throughout the day, but how you do them, it's up to you. And like kind of finding that structure to build myself was one, like something I haven't done before, like with school. But it's also, it felt very like empowering, like I can make this my own. This is like something I can evolve into what I want it to do or I want it to be.
My next question for you all is, what do you do, or I guess, first of all, what are some challenges that you have faced in the workplace? Whether that's interpersonal or with the work itself, or even just, navigating that work-life balance. What are some challenges that you have faced, and how have you worked through them?
Being considered the same age as my kids is definitely something that you get a lot when you start a new job or you look very young in a career, just being compared to your coworkers' kids constantly, but wanting to define yourself as a young professional or as a professional is definitely something that you have to work through, and you have to establish like, oh, that's nice, but let's talk about X, Y, and Z in our career. So that's definitely been a challenge for me.
Yeah, I think I would kind of echo being young in the workforce with kind of wanting to learn things and like being open to taking on responsibility and being eager to like just figure out what you're supposed to do at your job without saying yes to everything and without people thinking that you can just do whatever they need you to do whenever they seem or they want you to do it. In my current role, it's really easy to get kind of pulled into like doing little tasks all the time for particular people, and it's like, oh, I actually have a full job outside of doing things for you. And so just like establishing boundaries and things like that, in terms of like, hey, like, yes, I would love to do that for you, but I've got to do X, Y, and Z, and I'll get to it when I can get to it, instead of just being like, yes, that's fine, I'll do it for you, and kind of putting their priorities before your own. And if you can establish that boundary and kind of have your own routine, or like just setting your own order of how you want to do things, can make it easier on you. And then you can also give yourself the space to say no and not overwhelm yourself. And that was something that took a really long time for me to learn, because somebody who's new in the role, like, you don't want to say no to people and you don't want to disappoint people. And I said yes a lot in the beginning. And that can be a tough thing to learn.
Yeah, I think that this is a really great point, and I'm still learning the boundaries. I think that, like, especially if you're eager to learn, like what Molly mentioned, is that you want to say yes. I mean, you don't mind doing the work, and if you are excited to learn, but having that sense of boundary is really important, because then it will always happen. You'll always be asked to do things, and it will kind of never stop. And then you're never really able to kind of make the position that you have yours. And there's some type of respect in that. But yeah, I'm also having some challenges just being one of the youngest in my office, in the building. And so, yeah, there's a lot of ageism. I've said it. There's a lot of ageism as a young professional. And if you can create relationships, even if they're not necessarily your age, but if you can create relationships with people who aren't necessarily just your colleagues, but can also be your friends at work, they can kind of create like a safe space for you to say, hey, like, these are the things that I'm struggling with. What should I do about it? That isn't necessarily someone that you work with, because that can sometimes be a little bit, that can be a challenge within itself. So I think just having a relationship, having a friend that you can go to that can relate to your work environment, that can be really helpful to kind of create kind of a mentor for you in your work.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, just, having a conversation about ageism is so important. It's something that's pretty prevalent in the workplace, especially for young people, but it's not always talked about necessarily. So I'm curious if you all have experienced, other instances of ageism or challenges related to being young, specifically in the workplace, and just, what that has been like, and kind of how you deal with that specifically.
I'll just go right into it. I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine just about ageism, and she's also young. She's a nurse, and it's not like in certain industries you don't have to be in corporate America. You don't have to just be in healthcare. I mean, it's in many different places. Whether you're owning a business, it's just something that you can struggle with. And I think for me, it's the feeling of being incompetent that sometimes that can make you feel like, or imposter syndrome. There's all of those things where you're worried that somebody else is going to make you feel less than, and that you're seen, less skilled. And a lot of times we can overcompensate. And I think that goes back again to what Molly was mentioning is, kind of setting that boundary of not proving to everybody that you can do everything so that you can get the respect, and having that boundary can actually do that for you.
Yeah, does anyone else have anything they want to say about ageism in the workplace or imposter syndrome or anything like that?
I feel like being questioned, like, oh, you're so young, you don't know what that means, or you haven't experienced that yet. But it's like, no, I have, like, I've dealt with this before. This is something that I've, like, that has been brought to my attention. I have handled properly. I think throughout this pandemic, we all have been given things that wouldn't have been given to us, or things that have come up that wouldn't have been come up. For example, like, patients need COVID swabs before surgery now, and if you test positive on a COVID swab, then sorry, you're not going to have surgery, which is something that 2 years ago wouldn't have ever happened. It's like, okay, you don't have TB, cool, you're good to go. So I think constantly being questioned and people assuming you haven't been through this challenge before, is definitely something I've struggled with many of times.
Yeah. I would say also that at least this is pretty particular to my job, but I have my coworker and I came to the job at the same time and we're the same age. And then our third coworker, so there's three of us, has been in the role for 17 years. And so the amount of people who just jump to asking him questions because he's been here longer, even though we might be more convenient to ask because we're right there or we're around and we're willing to help and learn, but they just know that, oh, he'll probably know the answer, instead of even giving us a chance to figure it out, or to maybe we already do know the answer, kind of having to figure out a way to let them know that you at least are willing to help, or at least you want to learn how to find that answer, can be tricky because, when people have been there a long time, it's their routine, but it doesn't feel great to know that they just want to bypass you because you're young. Yeah.
Yeah, I so appreciate you all kind of explaining and sharing some of those experiences that you've had with that. And Sierra, mentioned this and touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious, what do you all do to get support when you're dealing with the challenge of ageism, or really any challenge that you encounter in the workplace? What do you do to work through that and to get support from others?
It's nice to have somebody to talk to kind of air your grievances and kind of work through issues. But it can be hard if it is your coworker, and if you're in, you're in it with that person and you're doing it together, it's really difficult if you're both going through that struggle, like where do you then find support? And yeah, I think that's something I still struggle with, is like I can find somebody who can share that, like those grievances and that struggle with, but doesn't necessarily help get much done. And so, yeah, I think I would just say that that's something it's hard to find. And yeah, I'm still kind of working on that.
I think, like, if you actually have a question or you don't know the answer to something, don't be afraid to ask for help. You shouldn't be ashamed to ask for help. And even if it's, how do I transfer a phone call? Something simple as that, like, no one's going to look down upon you for just asking a simple question. And then after that, you might know the answer to it to help someone else. But I think if we support each other and if we have this constant flow of communication, I think we can all help each other. Even our older coworkers may be able to learn things from us that they didn't know that they could learn if they didn't ask a question to us.
Yeah, I really like that point that we can teach other people as well. We're not always the one learning. I like that. Yeah, I think they both touched on everything I was going to say. Relationships, not being afraid to ask for help. It doesn't make you look less competent or skilled. Yeah.
Yeah, I would also just add on to what both of you were saying, but that asking questions is not, I feel like I've learned that it doesn't make you look bad. It makes them know that you care about what you're doing and that you're wanting to learn. It's not like, oh, will you just teach me how to do this because I'm like, if I don't, then I'll look bad. It's, oh, I want to know how to do this. Like, explain it to me, show me how to do it, and then I can show somebody else or whatever. So I think, yeah, just don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, I love that. And that's something that I'm constantly reminding myself as well. Great. So another thing I wanted to bring up is the concept of self-advocacy and advocating for yourself. I think that's something that, we all have to learn at some point in our lives and in our professional careers. And it can be hard sometimes to learn that skill and to really practice it as well. So I'm wondering if you all can tell me about a time where you needed to advocate for yourself in the workplace and what that experience was like for you.
I definitely have done that. I was doing probably 3 roles in one job. I was working the front desk, I was handling admissions in the building I was working in, and then I was handling admissions in another building off-site. And I was working 7 days a week, probably 9 to 10 hours a day. I was getting paid overtime, which was great until I was doing this for 2 or 3 weeks straight, and I was tired. I wasn't eating, I wasn't drinking water, I wasn't being me. And that was kind of when I was like, no, like, I need to put my foot down. I need to advocate for myself. Like, this is not healthy. This is not what I want to be doing. Like, we need to find a different solution that doesn't involve me working my butt off for 70 hours a week. And at that point, my boss was like, oh, yeah, I have you doing all of that, don't I? And I'm like, yeah, can we only have it to like one building? Or like, I just can't be doing this. And he's like, okay, yeah, let's make a change on Monday. And I was like, okay, cool. And it was simple as that. But I had to kind of put myself through all of that to kind of realize like, nope, nothing's gonna happen if I say no to this.
Yeah, I feel like maybe also in healthcare in particular, especially during this time, we're pretty understaffed. I mean, everyone's kind of understaffed at the moment. And so, like, yeah, people end up taking on more responsibility just because it's got to get done somehow. And yeah, it's saying that that you can't handle all of it is okay. I had an instance a couple weeks ago where I was kind of, ended up doing like 3 or 4 kind of positions kind of compacted because I was there during the time that those things would have gotten done. And if I didn't do them, nobody was going to do them. And so I like kind of had somebody see me doing all of these things, and I was like, hey, like, can you let like our boss know that like this, like, I can't do all of this? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I was concerned that you were going to have to do all of this. And then brought it up with my boss the next day of being like, so this happened last night, and like, can we try to avoid this in the future? Like, and she was like, oh, absolutely. Like, yeah, that's not something that we want to happen. But yeah, it doesn't feel great in the moment. So trying to work towards avoiding that in the future, is very beneficial.
Yeah, for me, I can just think of a situation that had happened, and this was before I was working in this position, and it was when I was doing a short-term project before this, and there was a miscommunication on the hours and pay that I understood I would receive. And so I had to kind of go to HR, and they kind of focus on many things, but they focus on that, and just bringing my concern to them. And it can be really intimidating because you don't necessarily want to create conflict and aggression or anything. But I think it's really just making sure that you're advocating for yourself and getting what you need. And not everybody always has you at the forefront of the focus all the time. So you have to do that for yourself. And um, advocating for yourself isn't necessarily saying, hey, this is my problem, because especially if you're in a large organization, they have so many things that they're doing. So it's important that you follow up, and that you reach out, you see what's going on with the process, and you just see it through the whole way. So that way you ensure that there's an actual outcome. So I mean, I had a lot of help with that. I didn't just do that all on my own, but I think that also comes with self-advocacy, is that you have support around you, or hopefully you have support around you when you're advocating for yourself.
Yeah, also to touch on that, one thing I've struggled with is because it's a big company and there's like a lot going on and I'm a very small player in that, feeling like, oh, my concerns aren't big enough to bring forward, or like, oh, my boss has a lot of bigger issues to worry about, like, and kind of justifying to myself of like, oh, like she doesn't have time for that, like, oh, it's not going to get done. But in the end, that doesn't change anything. So at least putting yourself forward and like giving yourself that opportunity to advocate for yourself is better than just dealing with it. But that can be hard if there's a lot of things going on in your organization or business or wherever you are.
Students here might be wondering, what are some skills? I'm in school right now. What are some skills that I can start to develop now for when I do get to that first full-time job? So yeah, what are some workplace skills that high school students can start to develop now that can prepare them for that first job that they have, whether that's out of high school or college?
I definitely think organization. If you're currently playing a sport and you're going to school, that's challenging in itself. You have to make it on practice. You have to make it to practice on time, and you have to finish homework. If you're in band and doing school, if you're doing anything outside of school and doing school, like, you got to stay organized. Even if you're just doing school, like, you have to stay on top of your homework, and you have to stay on top of all of your assignments and doing things. So definitely organization for me, for sure.
This isn't so much as a skill, but just like, I guess, organizing your time and your kind of days. I think when I was in school, I didn't really like allocate a lot of time for fun. And then I like kind of got into working and I was like, oh, well, we're just working to like get a job and we're going to school so we can work. And then I'm like, well, if I'm not having any fun and I'm just spending all of my free time studying or whatever and not having fun, then it doesn't make working more enjoyable. Like it doesn't necessarily make your job better. Like just having that balance of like finding times for yourself and just having fun and kind of planning fun can kind of just help your mood and just make your outlook towards work better too. If you're only working, you're going to start to hate what you do, I feel like, or you're just going to spend too much of your capacity on it. So figuring out a way to like schedule times for fun can help a lot.
Yeah, those are good points. And I think I would also like to add that, considering the fact that a lot of the people who are watching are in high school, they're not even upperclassmen yet. And I think it's really important to just like get to know yourself a little bit during these times. Like, what is your personality like? What are your interests? What are your goals? Like, what fascinates you? And just really understand you as a person, and then try to see how that is reflected in a job. And so I think kind of preparing yourself for that, and then that way it can kind of lead you towards the things that you like, and that you're not pressuring yourself to do something that you think you might know of. And I think a good thing to do that is like, if you have an idea of what you want to do, or if you don't, that's fine. Life goes on and you figure it out eventually. But if you do have an idea of what you want to do, I think just looking up like job descriptions and like what they're asking for, what they've studied, just kind of doing your homework. What else? If there's internships or programs, or if friends that you have. Like Molly ended up getting a job from a family friend. If you have people that you know that have a business or like in the industry that you're interested in, like hit them up and ask them if you can, volunteer your time, or like ask them how it is. Like just getting yourself close to the environment or in the environment that you're interested can be really helpful. And number one, it can either confirm that you like it or not. And then it can also give you an opportunity to build more experience in that job. And so that when you apply for that job, if you still want to do that or go into that industry, then you and the person who is hiring you has a lot of comfortability in going into that position, because you've had a little bit of experience, you know a little bit about it. So you're not like extremely intimidating entering a position that you've never done before. And that the person hiring you kind of sees, oh, okay, they've kind of actually been in this a little bit. They've interned or they've done a program or something like that. So that's the advice that I would give.
I would also say that like no experience will be a bad experience in terms of your career or like trajectory. I think like I did journalism and sports in high school and then got a weird alternative science degree in college, and like and I had to switch majors like 3 or 4 times. Like none of it followed any particular trajectory, but I learned so much from knowing that, oh, I don't want to do that. And that's a good thing to know what you don't want to do. And it sucks to have to learn that the hard way. But if you didn't do it, then you wouldn't have learned that that's something you didn't like, or that's not something you wanted to do. And so kind of accepting that, not everything is going to be the perfect, straight line step towards your career. It's always going to go back and forth. Is like just a good reminder to have for yourself. Yeah, I still don't really know what I want to do. Like I'm still figuring it out. And that's okay. I think there's a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves to like when you're a freshman or even a sophomore in high school to know what you want to do, and everything is just working towards that. You can confine yourself and just follow the things that you enjoy doing.
Why do you think it's important to have this conversation about being a young professional, or even just, bringing up, like ageism and what it's like being young in the workplace? Why is it important to have these kinds of conversations?
To feel like you're not alone in this, that people are around to support you, or just to hear like, yeah, it's okay to feel that way, because we're all feeling that way, but we just might not talk about it. But definitely feeling like you're not alone in this journey.
I think also like, at least for my time throughout high school, it was always like, okay, after high school, what's next? Are you going to work? Are you going to school? Like, are you doing internships? And then once you get to, at least for me, it was college, it was always like, oh, what's the job? And then there was no, what's after that? Like there was no conversation. It's just like, oh, and then you'll start working, and nothing. And I was like, okay, like that's cool, but like, what's that like? Like, so I think, yeah, having this conversation and like talking about that transition is really important.
Yeah, no, I think that it's really important when we have these conversations. It reminds us how important our voice is. And I don't think that there are a lot of opportunities right now. I really think that that's changing. But I don't think there are a lot of opportunities for us, when we're working in a place like, what is your experience? And then taking that answer that we give and then like making sure that it's being heard somewhere else and that change is being implemented. So like having these conversations is just really helps you feel valued. And it, reminds us that we bring a lot to the table and that we can take advantage of new opportunities when we're having these conversations. And additionally, it can kind of bring a community together, and a network, start networking, and you hear of situations that are happening. And so anyways, I'm happy that I was able to be part of this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining today. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to just come together and have this conversation and just share your experiences with us. I know students, will really appreciate getting to learn more about this, as do I. So thank you so much.